YouTube channel. My name is Angela and this is my creative corner. I feel kind of out of practice. I haven't filmed in some time. But this episode I'm going to be filming everything that I knit in 2024. So 2024 was my second year of knitting. I started knitting during Christmas time, late December of 2022. It's a little bit past, New Year, January 1st, but I had some things in my personal life going on, so I have been sidetracked. So if my mood in this video is a little bit off compared to normal, just keep that in mind. But I'm hoping that filming this and kind of reviewing, looking over all that I've done throughout the year will be something to kind of take my mind off of things, and hopefully by the end of this video my mood will be a little bit better. So we will see. As you can kind of see the sneak peek here, I'm giving you a little tease, not too much. Tilt the camera upwards, it's actually taller than this frame, so quite a lot to get through. I think the way that I'm going to structure it is I'm going to go over each piece roughly in chronological order. I'm not someone that takes diligent notes on Ravelry on like the day I started, the day I finished, but just kind of roughly throughout the year when I finish them. And I think I'll try on each piece as I'm talking about it, so that you know how it looks like on the body. I did take some shots before this, trying everything on. So I'm filming with natural light right now, and I'm suspecting that the sun might start to set. So if that happens while I'm going through it, I'll be inserting clips that I took earlier, so you'll kind of see 360 what all of them look like on the body. Like I said, I'm not someone that takes diligent notes on Ravelry, but just before I sat down to do this video, I looked at all my knits, and these are kind of my general overview statistics. I did total of 14 projects, and of those 13 were garments and 1 was an accessory. I did 1 gift knit, and of my garments, 5 were sweaters, 2 were cardigans, and 6 were vests. In terms of designers, the designer that I made the most patterns from was My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I made 5 designs this year. Next in line would be Other Loops, and I did 2 designs from them. The remaining 7 patterns were all 7 different other designers that I had done. And then also, interestingly enough, of my finished objects this year, 4 of them were repeats. So either ones that I had knit previously last year that I knit again, or some that I knit near the beginning of the year that I knit again before the year was over. So you'll see a theme in terms of the repeats. Usually they are in a very different yarn combination. So even though they're the same, they fill different spaces in my wardrobe. So yeah. I'm going into 2025 with 2 whips that I didn't get to finish by the end of the year. And I have 1 whip that I have since abandoned that I am just gonna unravel and not continue working on. Time is arbitrary, time's not real, so ending the year with clean needles, although it's like nice to have as a goal, it doesn't really bother me that much that I'm carrying things on into the new year. I make things to have them live in my wardrobe to wear daily, so if I don't finish it by the end of the year, it's not like I'm not gonna want to continue wearing or making them, so I'll just keep making it in the new year. So that is fine. By the way, I have everything written down on a clipboard here. I'm filming on my phone and I don't have my laptop right now, so I'm going analog. When I was going into the year, at the top of 2024, I had knit stockinette and I had knit 1 textured vest in my first year of knitting. And so I wanted to branch out to different constructions, different techniques, and to kind of grow my knitting repertoire. So the goals that I had were color and texture for this year. Cables were new as of this year, as well as I had never done color work before, so color work was also a new technique. I ordered my knits in order of how I'm going to talk about them, so hopefully this doesn't fall as I take them down to try them on. But I'll start with my first project of the year, which were these slippery slope mittens. This is a pattern by Woolsmith Knitwear. I believe that's what it's called. Yeah, Woolsmith Knitwear. So this one sneaks into my roundup this year. I did actually cast this on Christmas Day of 2023. And I knit one glove or one mitt in one day. Like I finished it on Christmas. And then I knit the second one, I think, on December 31st. Again, I finished one all in one day. But I'm counting this in this year's roundup because I didn't wash and block it until January 2nd of 2024. So it snuck into 2024, and it's been one of my most worn knits of the year. This one was my very first cabled project. I knit with the Briggs & Little Heritage 2-ply on 4.5 millimeter needles. With this one, it is 2x2 ribbing with these twist cables up the front. And then the back is just stockinette. And the way that it's worked, you cast on from the bottom, you work up in the round, you put in some scrap yarn when you get to the thumb hole, and then you just keep on knitting. You knit your decreases at the top, and then later you pick up stitches around the scrap yarn and you knit the fingers. This one, like I said, has been one of my most worn knits throughout the year. This yarn I think was perfect for this project. I don't know if you can see, but like to me these look good for a full year of wearing these, I mean, every single day in the wintertime. I live in Canada and it is cold for the majority of the year, and I wear these every single day, driving, shoveling, you name it, I'm wearing these. I do actually have like a thin pair of mitts tucked inside. And I find that especially on really cold days, this is like my hands are toasty warm no matter what. In terms of the construction, with this being my very first cable knit pattern, I thought it was easy to follow. Like I said, I finished it all in one day, and I liked the idea of doing something small for my first cable project so that I wouldn't be discouraged if I had to unravel it and start again, which I didn't end up having to do, so that worked up quite quickly. I don't know if you can see the difference between the cuff on the two mittens. I followed the pattern exactly to pattern for this one, and the pattern doesn't tell you to size down for the ribbing, so I just knit it with the exact same needle size. I think it's 4.5 millimeter needles, and I use that to knit all the way up for this mitt. And I found that it kind of splays out at the bottom. So when I have this one on and I'm, let's say, wearing like a coat, it kind of like scrunches up and it doesn't fit nicely inside. Like I can tuck it in and then it looks okay. But it wasn't to my ideal liking. So I tried sizing down to 3.75 millimeter needles on my second pair. And as you can see, or hopefully you can see, I don't know, it's just a little bit more straight, and it has more like spring, I guess. When you put it on, it doesn't splay out as much, and it fits nicer into coats. So I would say if you're knitting these mittens, I would recommend sizing down for the ribbing, but that would be the only modification for this. This was left over from my terrazzo neck that I finished at the tail end of 2023. And then talking about the yarn, I feel like this is a really good yarn to use for something that's like high friction. It's quite durable. I would say that there's like minimal pilling. What you're seeing here is an end that I didn't weave in properly, but minimal pilling. I think that maybe it's even, I don't know if it's felting, but that's kind of even good because it just helps it be warmer. But I don't wear the terrazzo neck that often because I find that this yarn is scratchy and not itchy, but like actually it feels like rough against my skin, and it's not comfortable for me at least. So The terrazzo neck is like a big high collar. I'll maybe insert a photo of the pair together. And I don't wear that one as often unless I'm already wearing a high turtleneck. And then in that case, it's like I don't really need that over top. In terms of this yarn, I would use it again for accessories like mitts, or something that I'm not going to be wearing like close to skin or around my neck or anything like that. Just to keep that in mind regarding this yarn. I love the color combination. I find that it pairs well with all of my winter outerwear. So I have like a black wool coat, as I'm probably inserting a photo here. So that one I just find that it just pops really nice in the winter. I'll just mention, I didn't start my YouTube channel until like more than halfway through the year. Some of these patterns precede my YouTube channel. And then some of these I have talked about in previous like knitting podcasts. And then there's one here that I haven't yet showed on my channel, so that would be brand new. The way that I'm gonna do it is the ones that I haven't talked about yet on my YouTube channel, I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. And the ones that I've talked about in previous episodes, I'll kind of talk about more briefly. I'll mention which episode to check out to get a little bit more info on it. Just so that I'm not repeating myself and so that this video isn't too long. So the first garment that I finished knitting in 2024 was this one here. And this one is the Harlowe sweater V-neck by Caidree. And I knit this one in Estelle Eco worsted. So that one is a combination of merino and cotton, I believe. I believe it's like a 50-50 blend. I knit size extra small. I did crop the length and I omitted the side slits on the pattern. So this one is very similar to the sweater number. I don't know the number, but it's another like V-neck sweater by My Favorite Things Knitwear. So this one is very similar to that, but I chose this one instead for a couple reasons. Number one, the sizing was a lot better on this pattern. I guess I'll write on the screen what the sizing goes up to, but I believe that the My Favorite Things Knitwear one only has 3 sizes. So this one was a lot better in terms of that. And then also this one has a nice detail along the back of the shoulder where you knit an I-cord first, and then you pick up from the I-cord to knit the back, and then again when you're knitting the front. So you're just left with this braid that goes along the back of the sweater. But I really just like that detail. It looks really nice and polished. So I'll just try this one on. So this one here, it is a cropped length. I knit it just kind of to my waist. The sleeves are quite long. There is some decreases down the sleeve, but I would say that the effect makes it look pretty straight. 2x2 ribbing on the cuffs and the collar. And the collar is double folded. You do knit like double the length and then sew it down. I do really love the color of this knit. I find that I don't wear this one as often as I would like, for a couple reasons. The first reason is that this yarn did grow a lot with blocking. I didn't do measurements before to know exactly how much it grew, but the sleeves are quite oversized. The body is quite wide compared to like my bust circumference. And I find that also the neckline stretched out quite a bit. I don't know if I have a photo of what it looked like before blocking, but the neck was just a lot tighter. And I almost prefer what it looked like before I blocked it. I do still like this look, but I find that it's harder to style day to day in the winter. It's just like a bit oversized, I find. And for wearing it underneath jackets, I find that the body and the armpit kind of scrunches in, and then the neckline looks a little bit weird. So I do find that I wear this one more often in the transitional season, so in like fall or spring. That kind of ties in with the yarn combination as well. It's not very warm, So again, in the winter time and with the like really big open V-neck, it's not gonna really keep you warm, but it's almost the perfect thing to wear on like a fall or spring, even like summer, I guess, if it's not too hot evening, just because the V-neck is open enough that you get some airflow, and then it's quite cropped and wide, so I can still wear it with like mini skirts or shorts or jeans, and I think that that's kind of how I get more wear out of it. Not so much in my winter wardrobe, but more so in the transitional seasons. But putting it on here, I'm just reminded of the fact that I do really love this color. So honestly, I'm gonna try to make an effort to wear it more. And maybe in the winter, I'll just have to style it with like a turtleneck underneath, just so that I'm getting some neck coverage and it's a little bit warmer. And I'm not sure if I did this pattern again. There are some other V-neck sweaters that I have that are on my radar that I want to knit in 2025. So I might try some different constructions, particularly a saddle shoulder construction. I would say that I might revisit this. I knit the size extra small, so this is the smallest size that it comes in. So maybe in the future I would do something somehow to make it even smaller, or maybe I would knit it with a smaller gauge yarn or smaller needles, just to make it proportionally smaller. It's not the end of the world. I still do wear it. I do like an oversized fit, and I really like the color. So yeah. The next finished object is my first color work project that I ever made, and this one here is the Moodiversary Slipover by Spektakelstrik. So like I said, it was one of my goals to do color work in 2024. This one is a bottom up construction. So you cast on at the bottom, you work it in the round, you split, you work front and back, and then you do a 3 needle bind off at the shoulders, then you pick up and do the sleeves and the collar. So this one, I had a lot of fun picking out the colors that I wanted to go for. I was still coming off of that green sweater, so I was really obsessed with this kind of like brat green, I guess, but this was before brat, so anywho. I was really obsessed with this color and kind of like chocolate brown, and I find that that pairs really well with blue as well. In terms of a first color work project, I would recommend it. Like, I would say a beginner could definitely do this. Obviously I did it. I did make one modification to the color work pattern. I don't know if you can see, but on this first row I knit it to pattern, and if you can see, there's a gap between like the bottom of the face and the top of the face, or like the smile blends into the background. So what I did subsequently is I just added an extra stitch on the side of the mouth, if you can see the difference, so that the smile is like fully enclosed into the pattern. With this one, it's written for 2 different color schemes. There's one that's like a fully multicolored color scheme, and it has, I think, 12 colors, and then there's one that's a 4-color color scheme, and it's like more neutral. It kind of looks like striping a little bit, but I didn't want that. I didn't want it to look like any individual color was the main color. Like, I wanted it to look very equally colorful, like neutral. I did contrast for the hems as well. I did different for the sleeves and the collar and the bottom, just because, like I mentioned, I didn't want it to look like any one color was like dominating any of the other colors. You do have to catch floats, but only in like this section here where the wave is, when you're doing that part here. So it's not very often, just kind of like one row for each join, I think, is when you have to catch floats. I would say that that wasn't too bad. I did crop the length of this sweater. I don't know if I mentioned it for my previous one, but I did crop the length as well. And I would say going forward, just assume that I crop the length on every single one of these patterns. I might, to be honest, I don't read the length that the designer recommends. I just knit it to the length that I want, and usually that ends up being more cropped than the patterns. The other modification that I did is I modified the neckline. I'll see if I recall, but I think that the other neckline was more like wider and like a shallower curve, whereas this one I have is narrower and kind of more deep. I think that that was the difference. So I just kind of followed the neckline shaping for a previous vest that I made in 2023. And I'm realizing that I didn't try this one on yet. I love this vest. I think it is a statement piece. I get compliments on it. People that are knitters notice it and kind of clock it as something that is hand knit. I think that's all I have to say about this. It's one of those patterns where it's quite a statement piece, so it's not like I necessarily need another one in my wardrobe, but it was really fun to make and I really like the pattern, so I did make another one that I gave away as a gift. So I'll talk about that a little bit later when I get to that timeline. I continued to knock off my goals and I did my first cable knit sweater, which is this one here. This one here is the Waffle loop sweater by Other Loops, and this was my very first cable knit project that was a sweater. So I did take a big leap from my mitts that I made at the top of the year, and then I decided to jump headfirst into a fully textured garment. So this one is knit in kind of like a waffle texture with knits and pearls. And then it has this kind of cable motif. This one is quite an oversized garment as well. I think this is even bigger than my green V-neck sweater that I talked about. This one is a drop shoulder construction, and it has some really cool shaping and design around the shoulder and the arms, which I really like. And the pattern is written to have just the waffle texture throughout the whole arm. I was just like so into cables at this time that I wanted to make it like a really fully cabled sweater. For that, I did add this motif along the arm, which mirrors what's on the side of the sweater there. So I did it on both sleeves. And if you can see, I did make some mistakes in terms of twisting the cable. This is the second sleeve that I knit, and I guess I was just like eager to be done with it. I didn't frog it back because this just shows that it was handmade. This, I would say, I don't necessarily have favorites. I do wear all my garments, so they are all kind of in heavy rotation, but I would say with this one, it's the most like impressive. It's the one that I'm like the most shocked that I actually made myself. I think that that's the best way to put it. You do have to do the cabling flat as well as in the round, just because you're working the drop shoulder flat before you join under the arms. And I would say that, I don't know what the popular opinion is, but I find that cabling flat is easier than in the round, just because I find it easier to keep track of my rows and not having to count the rows, just because I know on all the purl rows, or at least in this pattern, on all the purl rows, I'm just purling, or like I'm just purling and knitting as they present. I'm not doing anything on the purl rows or the wrong side rows. And it's only the right side rows that I have to pay attention to, whether I'm going to be cabling or not. But like I said, this was my very first cable project and it was doable. So I would say you just have to pay attention. But I would say that this is really rewarding. And I have been seeing on Other Loop's Instagram page that she's teasing a waffle loop dress, which I would be intrigued in. I don't know if I would knit a full dress, seeing as I already have a sweater. But I'll see when the pattern comes out, because I could be convinced to hack it to make a matching skirt, so I can have it as kind of like a cord set with the sweater and the skirt, because I think that would look pretty cool. So yeah, let me just check my notes to see if I missed anything. The other thing I wanted to say is that, oh yeah, so in terms of sizing, this is a very oversized pattern, and I knit the smallest size, and I also cast on less than the pattern recommended under the arm, so this is actually smaller than the smallest size. So just keep that in mind if you're even, like, if you're smaller than me, or if you like less positive ease, because this is like quite a lot of positive ease. If you don't like that much positive ease, just keep that in mind that this is a very oversized garment. Takeaway that I also had from this pattern is that I love this yarn. So this yarn is the Ultra Alpaca Natural. I'll write the name of the brand. This has really nice like stitch definition without looking stiff. Like, I find that sometimes a fully cabled sweater kind of has like a stiff look to it, whereas this one, even though it's knit on like, I think 4.5 millimeter needles and it's kind of like a worsted gauge, it still has a really nice drape, and it is like next to skin soft, doesn't irritate me at all. And then from this, I've come to gravitate towards alpaca, just because it is quite soft and I like the drape. I do actually have the same yarn in another color that I hauled for a different project that I'm going to be working on this year, so stay tuned. I feel like there is very minimal pilling, and I do wear this one quite often. I feel like maybe compared to other yarns, it's not as like the cables are a little bit more flat maybe in comparison, but they're still legible. Like, you can still see the cables and see the texture. I really do like this yarn. I would knit this pattern again. I would recommend it for someone to knit. I do really like other loops as a designer, and as you'll see, I did knit next another pattern from her, and I have on my list for this year several of her patterns that I want to knit. So I would recommend this design, this designer, and if you're feeling like it, you can add even more cables to it. The next pattern that I have is the Johanne loop sweater, again by Other Loops. So this one, I would say one that I would recommend for a first time color work project. This one is knit top down in a drop shoulder construction. So you cast on for the back, you do some short rows, you knit down, you cast on for the front, you knit down, draw it under the arm, and then knit in the round to the bottom. And then you pick up and do the sleeves. In terms of modifications, I did do a contrast on the collar and the hem. Let me put this on before I keep talking. One of my favorite things about it is that contrast on the cuffs and the collar. This one I did talk about in my very first knitting podcast. If you want more information about this one, you can watch that to get kind of more in depth on the knitting process. The reason that I would recommend this one for a first time color work project is that you don't have to catch any floats throughout the whole pattern. Even though I knit mostly by My Favorite Things knitwear, I would say that the patterns that I've knit by Other Loops are my like top patterns. Like, even though I've only knit two, the two that I've knit are like both MVP in my wardrobe. In terms of this yarn, I would say I would knit with this again, and I actually have purchased it again in a different weight. This is the DK weight, and I purchased it in the worsted / Aran weight. This one has some pilling, I would say more than the previous yarn, or maybe it's just more visible because this is in that like very graphic color work motif, so you can kind of see when there's different colors of the pills on there versus the other one's textured, so it kind of like blends in. I did talk about this already, so I won't go over it too much, but that is this one here. I should be inserting some more photos Would recommend, wouldn't it again. I have seen that she's also come out with a version that is a raglan construction where it's kind of like a yoke colorwork in the same motif. And I think it's a thicker gauge as well. I think that one's like a worsted or Aran, maybe even bulky, I'm not sure. It looks pretty thick. So that is one that I'm considering potentially knitting in the future. Or honestly, I feel like I could knit another one of these, because even though this is quite graphic, if I did a different color combination, maybe one that has less contrast, or even like the same color and like a light and a dark of the same color, I would probably want to do it inverse, where I'd want this part to be the darker color and then this to be the lighter color. So this one I would say I would knit again, and I don't have any yarn purchased or like plans to, but I could see myself down the line knitting this one again. Apart from the colorwork pattern, I do just really like the fit. So I would even knit this one again just in plain stockinette and one color, just to have a drop shoulder plain sweater. So yeah, that is all for this pattern. All right, the next one that I knit is the Cardigan number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This one here I knit with Noro Ito in the color 60 koasi. And this one is knit on 5mm needles, and I would say that this one works up quite quickly. So that is what this one looks like here. I think I might not button it up for this portion, but I'll include some clips so you can see what it looks like all buttoned up. Noro is a Japanese yarn brand known for having their like heavily variegated yarn. Not necessarily I guess it is self-striping, but the stripes are very diffuse. Like it's not hard lines between the colors and they kind of all blend together. So it's more of a gradient, I would say. And then even within the same line, there's like lots of different colors, but from afar it kind of has a striping effect. I did go to Japan last year in May for my birthday, so this was kind of a project where I wanted to finish my Japanese yarn in order to take with me on my trip to Japan, which I did finish in time, so I did get to wear this throughout my trip. So in terms of the construction with this one, I would say that this pattern is like a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love the fit. The only modification that I made was the length of the cardigan. Everything else I knit completely to pattern, and that is rare for me. I feel like the shoulders fit perfectly. I love the neckline. There's a feature where you do some double knitting before you get into the collar, and that just makes the collar nice and sturdy. I like how the shoulder slopes down. I feel like the ease is perfect. I think I knit the size small. The sleeve decreases, and I think I knit the decreases in length also to pattern, maybe. I might have shortened the sleeves, but I don't remember. But I did follow the decrease ratio, so I'm assuming that the sleeves are what the pattern says. But I absolutely love it. I knit another one this year. I'm knitting the Dagmar jacket by Petite Knit, but I'm modifying it to be a saddle shoulder construction, kind of modeled how this one is knit. I am doing a full project vlog on that. It's still a whip, so we will see when I finish that and edit it all together, but stay tuned for that. That one is coming up as well. I would highly recommend this for anyone looking for a crew neck cardigan pattern. Even though I've knit 2, I do see myself knitting more. Like this, I think, is going to be my go-to cardigan pattern for this weight of yarn. In terms of this yarn, it is like a single ply yarn. It doesn't really have much of a spin to it. And also it is like a thick and thin kind of texture. So I don't really know if you can see. Overall, when you look at it far away, it kind of all blends together, but there are some parts that are thinner than others. But I feel like that just adds to the charm of the garment. I do have some pilling, I would say. Not necessarily pilling, more like it's just getting fuzzier and fluffier over time. Nothing that I can't just like pick off a single piece on its own. So I will work with this yarn again if I come across a colorway that I like. This one comes in really giant skeins. It comes in 200-gram skeins, and I think I bought 3 BRB. Okay, I went to just grab the leftover from this yarn. This comes in 200-gram skeins, and I bought 3 skeins total. And I just went to go weigh this, and I have 125 grams left over. So I used less than 2.5 skeins to make my size, which is the size small. So even though this yarn is a little bit more on the pricey side, but I mean, if you were knitting the size smaller than me or more cropped, or if you're making less positive ease than me, you could maybe sneak by with just getting 2 skeins. But yeah, 3 skeins was plenty enough to make this. And I have enough left over that I could make something else. I've been seeing people use Noro yarns to do like felted projects, so I could see myself maybe making a pair of like felted slippers, maybe. I don't know if I have enough to make 2 pairs, but I do have the next, or maybe not the next project, but I do have another Noro yarn in a similar weight. It's a different color, so maybe my slippers would be much mismatched, or maybe I could stripe them or do some type of color work on them to kind of mix and match between the two. So I could maybe do that. But I absolutely love this yarn and this color rate. I think it works up really nicely. If you can see here, this whole shoulder kind of has a color story, and this one has a different kind of color story. I did, when I knit the saddles, I did kind of pull the yarn until I got to this same similar color again when I cast on the front, so that this all kind of felt cohesive. And I think I did the same thing when I started the sleeve, so it was kind of like blending in before it got to the oranges and the yellows. And I did vice versa, where I cast on the front using the kind of yellows and oranges, so it kind of blends in, and then with the sleeve. So even though the striping is kind of random, I did do that just to make it a little bit deliberate, so it doesn't look so chaotic, but it does look quite eclectic, I would say. The next pattern that I made was another version of my Moodiversary Slipover. This one's one that I made as a gift knit. I cast it on as anticipating it being a Mother's Day gift. I made it for my mom. And I cast this one on before my trip to Japan, which was in May. My birthday's in May. So I did actually work on it as a travel whip throughout my trip to Japan. So that one was kind of nice to work on. Not what you typically think of, like a 4-color color work project to knit as a travel whip, but I did like do quite a lot while I was on vacation, so I did get a lot done. This one I did knit with a variety of superwash yarns, just because for my mom, I didn't want it to be a high maintenance knit, so something that she could wash in the washing machine on like the delicate cycle, and not have to worry about it felting or anything like that. I didn't enjoy the color work process using superwash yarns. I found that I had to pay attention a lot to my tension, and it was more prone to like puckering than with my other project. It did kind of come out when blocking, but even still I had to kind of stretch it and massage it in order for it to look right. And I do find like that one she does wear a lot, and she is starting to already get pills on it. So I would say durability wise, 100% wool, or it is 100% wool, but non-superwash wool is better, and I wouldn't necessarily work on that for myself, but as a gift knit, I thought it would be better not to burden them with also having to hand knit it. I did knit it in like varying shades of purple, which is my favorite color, and that was kind of my criteria, that if I was going to be knitting a gift knit, it was going to be something that a pattern that I enjoyed knitting and a color that I enjoyed looking at while knitting it. So it ended up being the Moodiversary Slipover in shades of purple. And she wears a lot. Okay, I'll speed through these next ones because these are all ones that I've talked about before on my knitting podcast, except for the very last one. So I'll just try this one on here. So this one is my vest number 2 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I knit this one in Durum Natura's Gilead. And I knit this one in, I think would be equivalent to a size small, but I actually based this off of a vest that I already owned, a store-bought vest, and I kind of took the measurements from that vest in order to knit this one. So I have a little bit more detail in my very first podcast episode, so you can check that one out to see. I did crop the length quite a bit from what the pattern recommends. I did also add short row shaping, and I took from my Caidree pattern to do that braided detail on the back of the shoulder. This one I would make again. I do really like this pattern. I might in the future try doing a double knit or a double folded collar similar to my Caidree one. I would use this yarn again. It is soft. Or I don't know if I would say soft, but it's not itchy, it's not prickly. It doesn't bother my skin at all. I guess it is a V-neck, so it's not like I have it on my chest too much. In terms of styling, I would say that this one I've worn in more ways than I anticipated. So I do wear this one kind of just like this, with a t-shirt underneath. I wear it in the winter with a turtleneck underneath, and I've even worn it in the summertime with like midi skirts and things like that, just because it is quite cropped. And then with the open neck, it's not too hot to wear in the summer, as long as it's not like a super hot day, or in the evenings, it's nice to throw on even with like a tank top or a t-shirt and shorts. So it gives you just enough warmth without being overly hot. The next pattern that I have is the vest number 4 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This is the other one that I was mentioning that I knit in a similar weight of Noro yarn. This one is the Noro Anemone, and I actually picked this one up during my trip to Japan from a yarn shop in Osaka. It is a top-down construction. You knit the back first, and then you pick up the fronts to knit the front 2 sides, and then you join it underneath the arms, and then I guess it's knit all flat just because it is kind of like a cardigan, I would say. I did modify the length. I knit it quite cropped compared to the pattern. I did also borrow from the cardigan number 9 pattern in terms of how I did the neckline. So I did utilize that double knit section before you get into the ribbing. So it has a very nice and neat look on that. I really enjoy the color for this one, and I would knit with this yarn again. This one I do have, I think, a full skein left over. It's 100 gram skein. So this was the one that I was mentioning that I could maybe use with the other yarn to make some felted slippers or something else. We'll see. I knit this one in the extra small in 4.5 millimeter needles. And I think that that's all that I have to say about this one. This one was also mentioned in my very first knitting podcast, so you can check that one out if you want more details about the construction. The next one here is one that I'm including as a finished object, however I will be unraveling it and knitting it again. This one is the Clematis vest by Emma Meyer, or Emma Knits is the other like tag that she goes by. So this one here is a really unique construction. It's a vest, but it has this really unique kind of button band. However, it is not a full cardigan, it is all joined. So I haven't added the buttons on, but you would be able to just slip it over your head. You don't have to undo the buttons to put it, to get it off and on. My issue with this pattern is that the neckline is too wide. I was off gauge when I knit this one. So partly my fault, but then also just the proportion of sleeve to neckline ratio is just off from what I would prefer. I would prefer the neckline to be more narrow and then the sleeve part to be wider. I also would prefer to have short rows in this design. There aren't any that are written in. But with this one, I have 100% or 100% plan on reknitting it. The pattern is very well written, so I will say that. Any of the issues that I have with the pattern are more so personal preference or the fact that I was off gauge when I knit this one. So not any fault of Emma herself. The pattern was really, really detailed in the writing, but not to the point where it's like over explaining and it becomes confusing. There's some really good diagrams in the pattern, and then she lets you know like specific length measurements, and if you're not going by rows, if your row gauge is off, then she kind of mentions length measurements as well, so it's very easy to follow even if you are off gauge for your row gauge. And actually, sneak peek, right now I am working on a Clematis sweater that I'm working on, and I did make some modifications. I didn't buy the sweater pattern, I just based it off of this vest, and I'm just going to add sleeves to it to make it a sweater. But I did already modify to make the neckline narrower and the shoulders wider. And it's working out pretty good so far. So that'll be something that I talk about in my next knitting podcast to see how that works out. But because that one is working out quite nicely, I am encouraged that it will be pretty easy to reknit this one as well with those modifications. The next one that I have is, I'll call it the sweater number 9 by my favorite things knitwear, but I did make a lot of modifications to it. So this is another one that I had knit a second version of. So I knit my first version back in 2023, and I knit it to pattern with the funnel neck, and I did modify splits on the sides on my original version. This one I knit with another yarn that I got from my trip to Japan. So this one is knit with Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo, and I picked this one up at the same yarn shop in Osaka. So just showing off the color variation here. This one, I modified the pattern quite a bit. The first thing that I did is that I did a double folded crew neck collar compared to the high funnel neck collar. Also with this one, I knit the size small. Let me double check. Yes, so I knit the size small on 4mm needles, but I cast on less stitches on the underarm. So this one has quite a bit less positive ease. And this one I think is my smallest ease sweater, and it might be the most cropped sweater that I own. This one is about the same length as most of the vests that I have made. And if you can see, compared to my other sweaters, the sleeve is also quite a bit more narrow. Another thing I did is that in addition to making its casting on less sleeves under the underarm, I carried the ribbing pattern that comes down the arm underneath the sleeve as well. In terms of this pattern, this is the second time that I'm knitting it, and I would knit it again. This has kind of become my go-to raglan pattern. I like that the arm yoke depth isn't so deep. I came to realize in some other patterns can be the case. So I absolutely love the color. I find that even though it's like very variegated, I find that it almost reads as a neutral. So unless you're up close to see the blue, the yellow, the green, kind of everything, like it's very heavily variegated, but from far away it almost looks like just a neutral beige. So I find that this one is quite wearable. And I have talked about this one, I think, in my second knitting podcast. So I'll mention that one, which one to watch. You can check out my previous episode for more details on that one. So my next pattern is the Cardigan number 9, my second version. This one I knit with a different yarn. So this one I knit with a yarn that's local to me here in Alberta, Canada. This one is the 2-ply yarn by Custom Woolen Mills in the color 22. And with this one, I knit it pretty much to spec with my last version. I find that compared to the Noro yarn, this yarn is a little bit thicker. I won't say stiffer, but it has more structure to it. So I find in comparison to my Noro one, the collar sits kind of more structured, I would say. It still does have some like movement to it. It doesn't look super stiff. It did kind of look super stiff once I first got it off the blocking mats, but since I've been wearing it, I find that it softened up quite a bit, and this one did also soften a lot with blocking. So don't be too alarmed if it's looking stiff as you're knitting it up. Once it's washed and blocked, I found that it really transformed, as well as it really fluffed up quite a bit. With my Noro yarn, also because that one's kind of like a thick and thin, you can kind of see through it a little bit, whereas this one is like a solid, like if you can see, it like fluffs up to fill all of the holes. So this one is quite warm. This one I would say I get the most wear out of at home. So pretty much, I don't want to say every evening, but like most evenings when I'm just sitting at home, I'm back from work, you know, knitting, drinking some tea, doing whatever around the house, I'll throw this on over top of whatever I'm wearing, and it's super warm. It has enough positive ease that it fits nicely over even if I'm wearing like a long sleeve or something underneath. Again, absolutely love this pattern, no notes. I would knit it again, and I plan to. And I would highly recommend it if it is on your radar. So this one, I would say, is slightly more cropped than the last one. That was intentional, and I think I like the way that this one hits with my body proportions a little bit better. I still like the other one. I'm not going to unravel it to shorten it, so it's not that big of a deal. Also with this one, I really like the yarn. I do like the color specifically. It's gray, but I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a warm gray. I just grabbed this in comparison. I don't know if you can see, it almost looks like it has more of like a brown or a beige to it. It's not like a cool icy gray. So I find that this one pairs really nicely with almost like any color. So I think that that's pretty unique. I like the buttons that I chose for this one. I did stick to the toggle, like the pattern photos, but I think that the black next to this color just works out really nicely. And yes, in terms of the yarn, like I mentioned, this one is kind of stiffer, I would say more rustic of a yarn. However, rustic in the sense that it feels like durable and heavy duty, but it doesn't feel scratchy. I wouldn't say that it feels soft. It feels almost like paper, like dry, kind of like maybe almost like cotton. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but it kind of almost feels like it's a cotton. If that kind of paints a better picture, where it's like dry and not necessarily like fluffy and soft, but it's not scratchy and it's not itchy at all. So in comparison to something like the Briggs & Little that I use to make these mittens, if I'm looking for a rustic yarn that's like an Aran weight, I would more so go for this yarn in the future compared to this one. So if I was making another like terrazzo neck or something like that, I would use something like this because this is quite warm, so it would be really good for a winter accessory, but it doesn't bother my skin even like around the neckline. And like right now I'm wearing a t-shirt, so along my arms and the sleeves, it's not itchy at all. So I wouldn't use this one again for a garment, I don't think, but this I definitely would. And I do actually have another project on the needles in this particular yarn in a different color. So yeah. All right, we're coming down to almost the end, and I think that I will beat the sunlight. You can see the lines as the sun is coming down low in my living room, but this is my second last project of the year. This one is my Korshavn vest by Spektakelstrik, I think is how you pronounce it. This one I knit with a combination of leftover Noro Silk Garden Solo from my garden number 9, as well as I held this one together with drops of Alpaca silk. This one here is another one of my repeat knits. So I knit a version of this vest back in 2023, and it was my first wearable garment that I actually knit. This one is knit bottom up, you split for the front and back, and then you do a 3 needle bind off at the shoulders. For some reason, I think because of the drape of this fabric, it's a little bit larger than my first version, and the armhole depth is a little bit lower. That doesn't really bother me. I still like the fit, and I would say I prefer having a larger armhole than a smaller armhole. So with this one, I can wear like button-ups. I've styled it with a button-up shirt underneath, and it doesn't cinch in or anything like that. Just do a close-up here so you can see the waffle texture. I really like the combination of the yarn with this pattern. I don't really think I have much to say about this one. I will mention that I did knit it off gauge, and I knit, I think, the size large to compensate for that. But it works out to the proportions roughly of what a size small would be. Again, you can watch my previous podcast episodes to get more info. And with that, I'll move to the last project of the year, which I haven't yet showed on my channel. This is my final project of the year. And this one was meant to be my Christmas sweater. I did finish it in time knitting wise for Christmas. But I didn't finish blocking it until just a couple days ago, but I'm still counting it because I finished knitting it. And I didn't get to wear it for Christmas. I did have some things, like I mentioned, come up in my personal life that kind of derailed everything, and knitting wasn't necessarily top of my mind. And yeah. So this was my first circular yoke color work pattern. I knit this one with 2 shades of yarn from the place is called Desdero Ranch Yarns. And I got both the skeins when I went to Knit City over the summertime. It is like very thick, hefty yarn. If you can see, I think this pattern is written for an 18 stitch gauge. I would say that this yarn is definitely like an Aran weight. This might even be thicker than the yarn that I used to knit up my cardigan number 9, or maybe similar, and that's an Aran weight pattern. But I would say that the stitch definition is pretty good. I did have some challenges knitting this pattern, which I will go into in my next knitting podcast just because I'm running out of time. But I would say the end product was worth it. And the issues that I had to do with the yarn in combination with my needles. So basically, I probably should have knit this with like a 5.5 millimeter needle just based on the thickness of the yarn for the color work. And I did it on a 5 millimeter needle, and it was very unpleasant. It felt like I was yanking the yarn to slide off every stitch. And I have the ChowGoo interchangeable needle set, and I'm used to my stitches just kind of like sliding off the needles. But with this one, it felt like every stitch was laborious, and yeah, like I almost didn't want to finish it. It was that unpleasant to knit. But I mean, in the end, once I washed it and blocked it, it looks really nice and it feels really warm. Because of that issue with the tension, there was quite a bit of puckering, which I think worked out for the most part with blocking. There is some of that where it's like cinched in where the color work is compared to the rest of the sleeve. I tried stretching it out with blocking. It's not super noticeable, so I mean, I'll live with it and I'm not gonna go back to reknit it, so yeah. However, the parts where I held it single, I find worked up to be the most like cohesive fabric. Like it looks really uniform. You almost can't really see the stitches. And I really like that. I would work with this yarn again, I think, if I was knitting just like a stockinette sweater. This was my first circular yoke pattern, and I don't know how I feel about them. I think that it looks pretty, I mean, I guess it looks fine. I was worried that the yoke underarm would be too deep or that it would be too tight on my shoulders. But after blocking, I think that it sits pretty nice on the shoulders and the yoke isn't too deep. I did make some modifications to the color work chart, but I won't go over all of that now. I'll kind of just give you an overview of what this looks like, and I'll go more into detail on my next knitting podcast. In terms of knitting this pattern again, I don't know if I need two of this pattern in my wardrobe. I think that it's quite a striking color work motif, and I like how graphic it is. So I think that I probably only need one like this. I might knit a similar like circular yoke pattern in the future, maybe. However, a lot of the issues that I have with circular yokes, and I think that this is maybe just coincidence, but at least it looks like a lot of them have very wide necklines. And that's one of the things that drew me to this pattern, is the fact that the neck is kind of more cinched in. The collar does kind of stand up on its own, and I don't know if you can see, but I did do just like a couple short rows to raise the back, and it didn't raise it that high, so I can maybe do a couple more. But I think that it's fine. I was worried that it would be kind of choking my neck, but I feel like it just looks like a mock neck construction, and I really like the color, so yeah. So that is everything that I knit in 2024. If you're still here, thanks for sticking with me. I should be back with a knitting podcast. I'm not sure when. I'm filming this one late in the year for and everything that I knit in 2024. Like, it's already 2025 when I'm knitting this, or when I'm filming this. And I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to edit and post as well. So we'll see when we get this one up. And then next knitting podcast will be sometime after that. So Right now, I'm just kind of taking things day by day. I'm not putting too much pressure on myself to be filming or posting. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see more updates on what I get up to. Overall, I am really proud of everything that I was able to knit this year, and it's kind of crazy to see how far I've come from just picking up needles in 2022 in the Christmas time to what I've been able to complete now. And some of these patterns, it almost feels like I've had them in my wardrobe for so long just because I do get so much wear out of them that it's kind of crazy to think that these were knit this year. These are one of my favorite videos to watch, kind of seeing what people knit throughout the year. And then also that gives you some time to see their thoughts on things after they've had it for some time. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, even though I think that it might be a little bit more rambly than usual. If I forget anything in terms of details for the patterns that you're curious about, you can comment in the comments below. I encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you're new and you're liking kind of my knitting style. I look to hopefully see you again in some future videos this